The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. I think we got a good one for you tonight. My name is Mike Brodinsky. This is the episode for September 13, 2012. On my left is the one and only internationally acclaimed Ralph Tomaselli, the executive editor of the Meriden Record-Journal. Ralph, we've got another full plate, a lot of politics. Yeah. The first chunk is going to be local politics, I think. And who better to talk about what's going on locally than Craig Fishbein, the Republican town councilor, who is on my right. Craig,
nice
welcome to the show. Yeah, we're looking forward to a spirited discussion. I want to talk to you about the council meeting on Tuesday night, which was September 11. And the first item on the agenda had to do with approving a labor agreement, a union contract, with the school nurses. And I understand the vote was 6-1. You were the one who voted against it.
Yes.
Just bring me up to date, bring the viewers up to date as to what the issues were and why you weren't happy with that contract.
Well, there were portions of the contract that you could be picayune about and generally be against. My objection to the contract was on a philosophical basis. I believe that everyone has a right to a job, and that this contract made it a requirement that in order to work as a nurse in our town for our Board of Education, you have to be a part of the union. And I think it's more important that we have skilled, licensed nurses as opposed to their affiliation with a bargaining unit. I don't think that that's a contractual arrangement that the town should be enforcing or be a part of, and therefore, philosophically, I was opposed.
Ralph, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was just curious. Do most of the town's contracts call for members to be part of the bargaining unit?
They currently do.
They all do.
I believe they all do, and I've brought this up as a point in the past.
Right, because I'm not sure everybody understands that every town worker is required to be part of a union.
Or if they opt out,
right,
they still have to pay the dues, which I think is wacky.
Okay.
So, you know, you can opt out to not be part of the union, but you still have to pay the union. I mean, I'm a right-to-work person.
Sure.
So.
There was another issue that caught my attention, Craig, and that was a procedural issue. I put a high value, and some do, some don't, on the Freedom of Information Act and the accessibility of public records and an executive session which only talks about items and subjects that are proper for executive session. And in this case, what seems to have happened, and I infer based on the circumstantial evidence, that the town council had a gathering. We no longer call that a meeting, viewers. They meet, can't use that word. They gather before the regular meeting starts. It's no longer called a meeting. And in the case of a collective bargaining agreement, they're only supposed to talk about strategy and negotiations. That is according to the Freedom of Information Act. Of course, when the collective bargaining has already been dealt with, there's already been an agreement which has been signed off by the Board of Ed and by the union, most of that strategy and negotiation goes away. And so to talk about the basics of the contract, what it costs, the raises, the meaning of the language, how it applies to the union members, all that belongs in the public session, because that has nothing to do with strategy negotiations. Yet, it seems again, once again, given the brief time that the council dealt with this in public session, that those nuts and bolts were discussed in executive session because they were not discussed in the open session. And it seems that once again, the council violated the Freedom of Information Act by talking about stuff in private that should have been out in the public domain. Your thoughts?
Well, I won't concede anything, but
Of course
I
not.
agree with your underlying premise. And I guess there's a gray area that surrounds that. You know, when you ask a question in that meeting, you know, what does this mean? You know, if the answer goes into this is the interpretation and this is why that is the interpretation, you know, then there's a gray area perhaps as to strategy. Philosophically, I agree with you. And I don't know how to deal with this going forward. You know, perhaps there should be some confining, you know, there's a presentation and there's no questions allowed to be asked, and that, you know, the Board of Ed says this is the reason why we did this, and deals with the strategy issues. But I philosophically agree.
Ralph?
Well, I think one thing, as far as taxpayers, why they should be concerned about this, and Mike has brought it up before, is sometimes you have parts of the contract. For example, I think the one that we talked about previously on this show had to do with the new teacher's contract, and the fact that if you chose not to take insurance, that you got somewhere around an $8,000 payment. And it added up to about $500,000 to $1 million, Mike.
Well, it was $4 million over 3 years.
Thank you.
It was a 3-year contract.
Right, so $4 million over 3 years.
Big number.
Big number, and I don't think that was discussed, you know, publicly by the council. I think, I'm pretty sure there were some councilors that might have wanted to have more of a public airing of that, and it didn't happen.
Well, before I let
Yeah.
Craig jump in, let me just sort of put some meat on the bones
Yeah, go ahead.
of that. Most of the time, the issues are not gray. For example, when you talk about how much the new contract is going to cost compared to the previous year, that's not gray.
Right.
And the only way of handling this, because as long as we have the current chairman, there's going to be violation after violation after violation. As long as I've been on the council, I tried to stop it when I was in there, but I'm just one guy. But there's only one way to do it. And that is to have the Board of Ed or whoever is presenting the contract come in front of the council, and all the general questions are aired first
Right,
in public.
Right.
And whoever is at the presenting table thinks somehow that is strategy negotiations, they could say, let's hold that for a
Right.
closed session. It's worked that way in the past. It's worked well that way in the past. We've done it that way once or twice. And I think on one occasion there was maybe just 2 or 3 questions that were asked in executive session. So I don't see a lot of gray, frankly. Remember, this contract has already been signed, sealed, and delivered.
Right.
So there isn't much left over for strategy and negotiations on a contract that's already been negotiated and the strategy has run its course. But, Craig, where did I go wrong?
Well, I mean, I'm different than other counselors. So, like, when I go in on one of these issues, I've done a lot of figuring already. You know, as part of this process, I've asked for, I don't know if when you were on the council you used to get this, you used to get the old contract as well as the new contract. That hadn't happened when I first got on the council. So I've put that into place. So I'm able to look at that. I'm able to do those comparisons myself. You know, so all those things aren't necessarily gone into, but philosophically we agree.
Well, you may be one of the few counselors that opens the file beforehand and gets briefed up. But it's my allegation, based on circumstantial evidence. When the council gathered before, they spent a lot of time getting the basics, because the basics were not dealt with in open session. Let's move on and talk about another issue. The big issue, the big buzz, is, of course, the Simpson parking lot issue and the Holy Trinity Wall issue. Let's bring our viewers up to date as to what's going on and what will be happening. But we first going to take up the Holy Trinity wall, and as we all know, the wall is in need of some repairs, and Holy Trinity Church came in front of the council a couple of months ago and asked the council for some help in repairing the wall. The council asked the town law department to look into the matter, do some preliminary investigation, and the law department verbally reported back on Tuesday night. The councilors had for about a week a written report from the Corporation Council. And the only issue that the council raised was the issue of the Holy Trinity wall. But on the agenda was another issue of the whole Simpson Court parking lot. So they ended up being melded, but let's first talk about what the Corporation Council said about the Holy Trinity wall. And for our regular viewers, you all should be, because you miss a lot if you're not a regular viewer. You know, you just miss a lot. You really do. We predicted, we talked about, Ralph, you and I, that it was a foregone conclusion that the Corporation Council is going to have to conclude the town was not responsible for that wall, and that's exactly what she said. It was obvious from her report. She put in a lot of hours researching old newspaper articles, looking at records that go back to the 50s, trying to find what sometimes lawyers call the scintilla of evidence that would put the burden, a burden on the town. Could find nothing, and the clear conclusion that the Corporation Council gave, and the clear conclusion that the town engineer John Thompson gave, this is Holy Trinity's wall. It is their responsibility. The town has no responsibility. Now, that meshes into the next subject, but I want to turn to Craig and just sort of get his input as to, did I read that right? Is that how you saw that meeting up to that point?
Absolutely.
Okay. So an issue...
Except for Roz Page's letter.
Let's talk about Roz Page's letter. You better explain to our viewers the contents of that letter, because I was sitting in the audience and I was confused until it was read, and then I heard it read, okay, but tell us about that.
Well, it was interesting that at the time I brought it up, evidently the mayor hadn't seen it, nor had Janice.
Roz Page is?
She's a surveyor here in town.
Retained by the church.
Is my understanding based upon the correspondence, yes. When I got to the council meeting last night, there was this piece of paper, and there was a letter from Roz Page, and basically it says the conclusion is that because activity happened here, and because the town had something to do with the parking lot, it is only a logical conclusion that the town put up the wall. And you know, to me, it just flies in the face of the facts, quite frankly. But I wanted everyone to have an opportunity to A, know about it, and to weigh in about the weight of it. So I did ask John Thompson if he had seen it, and if it changed his opinion or altered his opinion, and he hadn't seen it, but it didn't alter his opinion, and the same thing with Janice. It was just interesting. Yeah.
It didn't change the course of the meeting at all. Roz Page, again, is really a well-known and well-respected local surveyor.
Right.
And this one-page letter, as Craig said, was waiting for the councilors. I guess they didn't have a chance to see it before they got in the meeting. And it referred to the wall. When I heard it read, it referred to the wall. And I'm thinking, which wall is she referring to? Because, Ralph, we're talking two different walls. When you think about the back of Simpson Court, the boundary of Holy Trinity, you think of one wall going straight down?
Right.
Really not. A bin wall, which is a different construction than the concrete wall, was added in 1961. Oh. I think she was referring to the bin wall, which is a separate issue from the concrete wall that Holy Trinity Church wants repaired. Oh. So when you talk about the wall, the question is, which wall are you talking about? And I think I think she was referring, I'm not sure what wall she was referring to, but when I heard that, well, she has to be referring only to the bin wall that is not an issue. And a bin wall is characterized by metal, kind of like a stainless steel curving face to it. It's not a concrete face. And in order to look at that bin wall, you would have to go on top of the parking lot, roughly in back of Gaetano's restaurant, kind of look over the fence and see the different construction between the bin wall, which the town built in 1961,
Okay.
and the concrete wall in back of Holy Trinity Church, which the town did not build in 1961.
In addition to that, there's another series of wall between the bin wall and the Holy Trinity wall that is behind what is now known as the Dickerman property, or was referenced last night as being the Dickerman property, which would be behind, I guess, behind the spa, Body and Soul there. So we have, behind Gaetano's, we have that bin wall, then we have I think it was 14-inch wide wall behind the next property, and then you get to the Holy Trinity property, which that wall is 10 inches wide. So part of Janice's opinion was that if the town put in the wall, it would be the same width all the way through, but it isn't.
We got to get to the next issue, but it was interesting that Janice Small, the Corporation Counsel, also said it doesn't matter who built that wall. And you and I have said that on the show. It doesn't matter who built it. It's on Holy Trinity property.
So the issue is settled?
It's their wall.
Is the issue settled?
Yeah, issue settled.
Because John Letourneau seemed to be saying...
Only to John Letourneau.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No,
and
no,
you
no,
better
it's okay.
finish that thought.
No, but John
Yeah.
Letourneau, who usually is, brings up reasonable points, I find. I don't know if Craig and Mike agree with that. I'll say it. He said, I think there's still a lot of work that... He's saying that there's a lot of work that needs to be done on this.
He may have been the only one in the room that thought that.
Okay.
So that's an outlier opinion,
That's fine.
not
Just wanted to make
supported
sure.
by any evidence or anything else. That was his and his alone,
Okay.
and
Good.
it's conclusive. So at this meeting, the council anticipated, this answer from the Corporation Counsel, but also added to the agenda was this whole big issue of the Simpson Court parking lot. And the two issues of the Holy Trinity Wall and the Simpson Court parking lot were sort of in the same presentation. So the council didn't ask for a proposal about Simpson Court, but it got a proposal on Simpson Court, and this is the deal. And it's going to take just a minute to sort of outline it.
Go ahead.
First, the Simpson Court proposal is to build out a new Simpson Court parking lot just like before the referendum. It's the exact same proposal as far as it was represented, the exact same construction proposal that the town voted down in the referendum in 2011. It's the same construction.
Pretty overwhelmingly voted it down.
Pretty overwhelmingly
Yeah,
voted it down. Now,
yeah.
there's some differences this
Right.
time around. This time around, the mayor was proposing that the construction be paid for with a state grant.
Yeah.
Okay? And that would change the finances around from town of Wallingford writing the check ultimately to the state of Connecticut writing the check ultimately with a $50,000 exception. You got to work with me here on this exception.
Right.
The mayor's letter that was distributed to the council about a week or 10 days ago said that under this particular grant that he was eyeing for this parking lot, the abutting owners, and those are the four property owners in back of Simpson Court, from the bank to Gaetano's to the library to the Masonic, those are the four property owners. Ultimately, they would pay $10,000 towards the construction of the lot, and Holy Trinity Church would pay $10,000. So that's $50,000 towards the construction of the lot. If you do the math for the abutting property owners, they would be paying, my math is right, $333 a year. I'm just dividing now. I'm not taking into the cost of money or anything else.
Right.
It's about $333 a year, and for that, the town would lease the land just like before the referendum, just like that referendum proposal. The town would do all the snow plowing, and everything else stays the same, except you have the state grant and the property owners kicking in some. The Record Journal story, what is this, today, the 12th? I covered up my date. Led the story this way, the story of the council meeting on Tuesday, September 11. The headline, Simpson Lot Plan, Déjà vu, my French, déjà vu, some say. Seen it before. It reads this way, by lawyer Rich Salerno. Town councilors argued with town staff Tuesday night about a proposal to apply for a state grant to repair the Simpson Court parking lot, with councilors calling the conversation déjà vu. It's actually a slap in the face to our taxpayers who resoundingly defeated the last plan, said Councilor Craig Fishbein, our guest, said Craig Fishbein, a Republican referring to a previous Simpson Court lot upgrade proposal using solely town funds that was overturned in a referendum last November. I'm going to take a breath and turn to Craig and get some additional details as in the proceedings last night. And then I got some more information on the grant. Craig, what am I missing here so far in the story?
I don't think you're missing anything.
Okay.
It's the same thing over again, and you know, people have asked me since this came to our attention last week, how do I feel? And, you know, I'm not a masochist, but, you know, I feel like I'm hitting myself in the head with a plastic hammer. You know, I just...
Wait. Do we allow props?
That's
Ralph?
a really good one.
Do we allow props? I think he has in his right hand a deadly weapon.
No.
I think he, you know, we should screen those things before he comes in.
I actually went to Walmart today, and it took me a while to find a plastic hammer.
Excellent.
Wait a minute, it's our show. He can't take the jokes. I mean, I don't get that. He's a guest. He can't do the jokes on this show.
It's very frustrating. It's like a dog with a bone. And, you know, I look at our downtown and I see, you know, I believe Mr. Letourneau recently said to our Economic Development Commission that our infrastructure in our downtown area is crumbling. And I agree. Our infrastructure on town-owned property is crumbling, and I don't understand why we can't apply for a grant to improve that, why we have to apply for a grant to enrich private property owners.
So a little more detail.
Sure.
And for your viewers at home, if you have a pencil and paper handy, you may want to pick them up. Just some quick numbers. The way the town engineer broke down the expenses for this, it's an estimated 450. Purpose of our discussion, let's say 500, because the grant is a maximum of 500,000. They would be applying for the 500,000. Let's use that purpose of this discussion. But it's broken down into components because the Holy Trinity Wall, for which the town has no responsibility, is swept into the construction project, the repairs for which would be paid for with grant money. And according to the town engineer, he said that to fix the face of the concrete wall facing the Holy Trinity parking lot, those would be, he said, cosmetic repairs. That's the words he used, cosmetic repairs. That was about $30,000 to $35,000 to fix that. In addition, because there are fence posts, let's call them, penetrating the top of the wall, which is a no-no, because it disrupts the integrity, the waterproofing of the top of the wall, so water can get in there and expand and contract, you know, freezing and stuff. That fence post was not put in by the town. At least there's no evidence that it was put in by the town. No one was sure who put that in, but that has to come off. And another system has to be put on there. You can't have a retaining wall on the Simpson Court parking lot and not have some sort of a barricade. And to deal with a new fencing system and to repair the top of the wall, another $10,000, give or take. We're up to about $40,000 to $45,000, and then you have the issue of drainage, and this was not a well-developed question at this meeting. The drainage, and John Thompson said, was largely to protect the wall. Those aren't his precise words, but that was certainly the gist of what he was saying. To protect the wall, another maybe $100,000. Craig questioned him on that. We're going to turn to Craig in a minute and hypothetically say it's $80,000. But that number is soft. We don't know really what that is. And John Thompson, said, we're not sure. It could be a lot less. It could be as much as that. So you have these numbers, these amounts swept into the grant. And the question I'm going to raise in just a minute when we go over the grant eligibility is, how is that part of a grant? Now, we're not ready to talk about that. I got to lay out some stuff. I got to lay out some criteria. But Craig, weigh in on that so far. What can you add? What do I need correcting?
I think you got it.
Okay.
I don't differ with anything that you've represented at this point.
Yeah.
I know where you're going.
Well, we talked off camera.
Well, no, because
So,
it's
yeah.
one of my points also.
Right.
That the $100,000 expenditure, give or take, how does the state end up paying for that? With our tax dollars, essentially. We pay to the state. Either we pay it or they print it. But, just because it's coming from them doesn't mean it wasn't coming from us.
Ralph, here was an issue raised at the council meeting by some of the councilors and by some members of the public who went to the microphone. If there's this grant money available, why can't we use this $500,000 on another project?
Agreed.
On a property that we own outright?
How about one we're fixing up right now?
Some of that is temporary
Okay,
repairs.
right.
I don't think it's appropriate.
All right.
But some of it, converting the alleyway called Wallace into a full-fledged street, that's permanent repairs, perfect for this grant.
And we're talking
Perfect.
about Wood and Kaplan, of course.
Well, the interior of Wood and Kaplan, I got my doubts because it's a temporary lot,
All
and
right,
I don't
but
know how that
as
would
part
flow.
of that work, that's what comes to mind.
That's
So
what
go
comes to
ahead.
mind.
I
But
can,
we own other parking lots down Center, which could be improved with grant money. We don't have to get into this morass of private property and all those issues.
okay.
But this was the answer. The answer was, we don't have time to file for a grant on those properties because the deadline is September 28th. I think that's the date. That's 2 weeks away, depending on when our viewers are watching this, about 2 weeks away. And they said, we don't have time to do that. And the first time the mayor said that the town learned of this grant was in August.
Okay.
Got it? That was sort of set to accept at face value at the time.
Okay.
It didn't seem plausible to me that that was the case because this grant is the product, is a creature of a 2011 Public Act.
Okay.
So, there's... And I wanted to see, I'm going to digress for a minute and go on a little short story here. To prepare for the meeting, to prepare for the show, because I like to get it right, we try hard to get it right, I wanted to see the town file on this grant proposal
Right.
and the application, because I had a lot of questions in my mind, criteria, I just had a lot of questions. I
Right.
stay up at night thinking of these things. So I called up the program planner's office, the grant coordinator, basically, and I asked to see the file that the town had. I wanted to see that on Tuesday so I could prepare myself for the meeting and for the
Right.
show. And I was told that it was not available. I could not have access to the file. I would have to wait until the meeting on Tuesday night.
Is that the way it usually works?
I would say that on high-profile issues that have political implications, I think every counselor now sitting has had experience with, at the time of the meeting, the mayor dropping off material, right at the meeting, And I'm going to turn to Craig and see if I'm misremembering this stuff, but right at the meeting, dropping this information off, sometimes many, many pages, complicated, detailed information, and the counselors are put into bad position of having to digest this stuff, ask questions when sometimes, if you're like me, I gotta think about this. I gotta sit back and wiggle a pencil and refer back and forth. You can't plausibly be put in that position under the gun in the heat of the moment to digest all this stuff and ask all the questions that should be asked. I think you need to prepare yourself if you're interested, if you're one of those counselors that does that. I know Craig is one of the guys, one of the men and ladies that likes to be as prepared as he can be. But not everyone has that perspective. Point is, I was denied access to the file.
And it's public information.
You bet it's public information. You bet. It's a public document.
Right, this is a public document.
There could be documents, there could be some exceptions to that, but not many.
But they're free to take those out.
Absolutely.
And they can say, well, this is exempt, we need to take it out.
My view, it was an intentional disregard of the Freedom of Information Act. Just my view, based on the story I told you. So,
just so we're clear, though,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike, because Don Rowe reports directly to Mayor Dickinson.
he was the message carrier.
Right, and we should just know, for anybody who doesn't, I mean, Don Rowe works very closely with Mayor Dickinson,
He's carrying a message.
and he probably didn't let you see the file because he thought the mayor didn't want you to
Exactly
see the file.
right. Well,
Okay.
that was clear.
Clear. So that
No doubt about it.
Okay.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, that's good. I knew we had the show the next day, and we knew it's coming up at the next council meeting, and I still want to be prepared, for this show and the next council meeting. So, right after the discussion of this issue ended, I went up to the mayor and said, okay, I'd really like to take a look at the file. Now, we've gotten by this meeting.
Okay.
Denied access again, but this time, there's a denial that a file exists. Okay,
Sorry.
Let's go to Craig.
But just so to clarify, though, Mike.
I've rambled on for a long
You
time.
did, and I laughed, and I sometimes laugh inappropriately. But in other words, what the mayor
I'm
is...
laughing with you,
The
too.
mayor is saying, well, sometimes you have to laugh, I
Yeah,
guess,
right.
but just for the viewer. What the mayor is saying is that a file that Don Rowe had told you existed the day before now doesn't exist.
Well, when I started to pin Don Rowe down, he began to back off because he knew where I was
But
going.
he didn't say to you there was no file.
Oh, I tried to pin him down on that, and he began to wiggle. But Ralph, even you have a file.
Right.
I have a file. I mean, to say on this
Yeah,
complicated
you're right.
grant,
Good point.
there is no
Yes.
materials?
Right, I have a
How
Citizen Mike
disorganized
file,
are
yes.
we? I mean, how...
Right.
The filing system is just all
Good
over the
point.
place? I mean, come on.
Yes.
Craig, why don't you weigh in at everything I just said?
Well, I can't speak to the file issue. I can
Right.
speak to the getting documents at a council meeting and not having time to review those prior to question time. And I will tell you that this term has been, in my opinion, better than the last term, because I think I've been pretty vocal with regard to that I try and be prepared. And, it seems to be better last night with regard to this particular item, other than Roz Page's letter, which I don't think the mayor had anything to do with. We did get a drawing from John Thompson, but basically that was an update as to where the properties are, and it was more demonstrative than anything, and it really didn't impede questioning. So, I commiserate with you about your file issues.
I'm not
but-
looking for commiseration. I'm just pointing out that this happens. And Ralph, I'm going to lecture you for a minute.
Good.
There's, what I saw was two violations of the Freedom of Information Act on Tuesday night. One was the non-meeting meeting, and the other was denial of access to public records. And the guardian of the public's right to know, the guardian is not going to be the public officials ever. The guardian of the Freedom of Information Act is the press. And until the press discovers these issues, value these issues, and calls out those public officials who are violating the public's right to know, because the press is the guardian of that. It's going to happen again and again and again and again. My only suggestion is on some of these high-profile issues with political implications, when there's something on the agenda, send a reporter to look at the file.
Good point.
See what happens.
Right.
And if there's a denial to get to the file, say, no, the mayor has to make the presentation first, because this is not the first time this has happened. Experience it and you deal with it. And the subject, the headline should be access denied, behind closed doors only. We have a lot of secrets. We have to keep them secret. We're going to roll out the information as we choose, in the manner we choose. I mean, I'm serious. You know I am, because we've had a lot of talks about that. Let me get off my high horse. And so the issue was, the statement was, we didn't have time to use this grant for other projects because we just found about this in this grant in August. That's concerning, and I frankly, I really didn't believe that, and I still don't believe that. So just a minute of research, and I found that NBCConnecticut.com, NBC, National Broadcast, you know, the big company, had an announcement June 4, 2012. It leads off this way. On Monday, and it's Monday, June 4, on Monday, the State Bond Commission unanimously approved $5 million for the Main Street Investment Fund. Senate President Donald Williams created the fund, which is designed to develop and improve the small-town commercial centers so vital to local employment, and it goes on to describe this. So NBCConnecticut.com knew that this was in existence in June. For some reason, the mayor is stating the town didn't know about this until August.
Right, and you know, just to jump in here, Mike, because it's the Bond Commission, I'm sure that I didn't have a chance to check myself.
Yeah.
If it's the State Bond Commission, I'm sure that something also appeared, for example, in the Hartford Courant. It may have even run in the Record Journal. And certainly what goes on at the State Bond Commission, local legislators follow that very closely. Because quite often, either there's local awards being handed down or opportunities for local awards.
I'm going to turn to Craig in a minute, but if we first learned of this in August and it was in NBC.com in June, beginning of June, something is wrong. And if we learned about this sometime in June, something is also wrong. Craig, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, I agree on the timing and the impact of the timing. And one of the questions that hasn't been answered here is, we know that the applications have to be in by September 28th. Are those applications going to be renewed? You know, what if nobody puts in for these? You know, is there going to be another period? Do our feet have to be held to the fire? You know, an argument that perversely I heard last night was, if we don't apply for this, then somebody else is going to get the money. You know, amazingly, that was an argument that was put forth by John Letourneau, of all people, who has argued just the opposite with regard to the linear trail. You know, that it's time to take a stand. You don't need to take all this money. So, you know, with regard to the timing, it behooves the town to act upon these things.
And I suppose if a reporter, for example, had access to the file, you might find the answer to the mystery, but it may not be a mystery to others, just to me. But let's go into the terms of the grant, because it raises some serious issues. Okay. This is a Main Street Investment Fund program, it's called. And in general terms, it's intended to do the following. And this comes from the OPM website, material published online by the state of Connecticut. I'm not reading from my notes. I'm reading word for word what the state of Connecticut puts out. The program overview includes the following. I'm going down to the second paragraph. It says the grant that we've been talking about shall be used, and by the way, there'll be a pregnant pause, and when that happens, it's for a purpose. You know, work with me on this pregnant pause here. The grant shall be used for improvements to property owned by the municipality. I'm going to stop there. Does this grant fit, Craig? How does this work? We don't own the property where this parking lot's going to go. I mean, we lease it, or we hope to lease it. We don't own it. So
I haven't seen any proposed lease for the wall.
That too.
There's no proposed lease for the wall.
That's right. That too. But to get within the terms of this grant, the improvements have to be to property owned by the municipality. I just don't know what the wiggle is to get this grant qualified. I'm sure they have a wiggle. I'm sure they know what this says. And maybe they're going to say, well, a lease for 30 years. Maybe they'll extend it for 40 years. You know, maybe we may have a surprise. And maybe they'll say a long-term lease is the functional equivalent of ownership. Craig, do you have any thoughts on that aspect?
They might take that position, but still doesn't get rid of the wall.
It doesn't get rid of the
Holy
wall.
Trinity was not a party to any of those agreements, nor are they proposed to be a party to any agreement.
I want you to hold that thought because it blends in with the next sentence I'm going to read, but that's an excellent point. It goes on to say that the municipality may use a portion of the proceeds of the grant to provide a one-time reimbursement to owners of commercial private property for eligible expenditures that directly support and enhance an eligible project. Commercial, is that wall, the face of the wall in particular, is that wall commercial private property? I mean, that I think is a problem.
It would be a nonprofit.
Well, the church wouldn't be commercial property, and
Yeah.
so,
Church is a nonprofit.
Yeah. so I don't know how that fits in,
Yeah.
Ralph.
No, I agree.
You know, I just don't know. But all those things, I think, need to be addressed. It doesn't mean you shouldn't apply for the grant necessarily, but those need to be addressed. And if the town has a strategy to sort of fit what they want to do into this grant, it needs to be explained. I was hoping to see those considerations in the file that I was denied access to see if they had thought this out and how. What's an eligible project? Because not all projects are eligible. This is a grant that is somewhat specific in what it is intending to do. And in the materials that you get online, the first sentence of the section called eligible projects, it says the projects that are eligible if they are part of a plan, which is underlined on the website, a parenthesis also known as a town commercial center plan. That's in caps in the materials. So it has to be part of a plan previously approved by the governing body of the municipality, which is different, by the way, than the legislative body, because that's that term legislative body is used in another place. But it has to be previously approved by the governing body of the municipality to develop or improve town commercial centers to attract businesses and things like that. So in order to have a shot at this grant, and Craig, I'm going to turn to you in a second, we have to have a plan that was previously approved. And that needs to be explained. What is the plan? Craig, do you have any thoughts about how that could fly? Or
I guess one could argue that the plan that was shot down at the referendum was the plan. But a question for you, I don't understand what the distinction is between the governing body and the legislative bodies. The governing body is the mayor.
The website draws a distinction, and let me find it. There's a fact sheet online. There's a fact sheet, and there's a question and answer part of it. And one of the questions is, and I'm just going to read it, and then I'm not going to pretend to be able to interpret it, but I'm just going to read it. What is the legislative body that must approve the application? Now, the legislative body approves the application. You will see the governing body approves the plan. Two different functions, two different bodies. So it says the legislative body must approve the application. That's the question. What is the legislative body? The answer, it is the municipality's body of elected officials, for example, the town council or board of selectmen. That's the legislative body, but the governing body is different. What is the governing body which must have approved the plan? Answer, please refer to your town charter, which may define the governing body. Examples of the governing body are an economic development commission, planning and zoning board, or other municipal commission. Any thoughts?
I think that it would call for the town council to pass a resolution authorizing the mayor to approve the application.
What about the plan part of it?
I think the town council would approve the plan.
So you're saying the legislative body is the same as the governing body?
No, it's the other way around then.
Okay.
So the legislative body would approve, I thought procedurally that the plan had to be approved first, and that would be done by the legislative body.
Well, let me just read it again. The governing body must have approved the plan. The governing body must have approved the plan. Please, and what is a governing
I got
body?
you there.
Please refer to your town charter, which may define the governing body. Examples are Economic Development Commission, Planning and Zoning Board, or other municipal commissions.
I think the way that's written, the mayor would approve the plan, and that the town council would pass a resolution authorizing the application.
And I would not agree with that. I would say the governing body has got to be either the Planning and Zoning Commission, which has jurisdiction to make decisions and take votes. I suppose you could wiggle and say it's the town council is the governing body which approves plans for downtown development, but plan of development is a Planning and Zoning Commission document. I mean, and the application has to be approved by the town council, but in any event, there has to be a pre-existing plan approved. Here's my question. I mean, here's the issue. Where is the plan? How is the town going to address those requirements? What do they consider the plan to be? Who's going to approve it? All that's got to be worked out so that if you're voting on something, you know what the plan is, because otherwise you're voting for a plan you may not agree with, or you're voting for an application that refers to a plan. I don't know. I mean, what is the plan?
Well, it's interesting procedurally where we are currently.
Yeah, tell me about
where
that.
are we currently?
What do you think?
Last night there was no vote.
Right.
So there was no direction. There was certainly discussion. You know, the mayor was looking for some direction, but the votes weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes 5 votes to do something in the council chambers, and there was no vote, so there was no direction. So arguably nothing is going on, and there's a meeting scheduled for September 25. So on September 25, which unfortunately I won't be there, if all of this stuff is done, one would ask the question, why? Who gave you direction?
Ralph?
You know, and I just want to jump in a direction, and I think these details are great, and they may in the end certainly will decide whether this grant gets anywhere. But you talk about reasons not to apply for the grant, and the mayor looking for direction, and I would say he got direction last November when 4,000 people showed up at the polls a week after Election Day. They voted twice in November and overwhelmingly said, we don't want to see public funds used to fix up this parking place.
I want to turn that issue over to Craig in just a minute, and I'm going to let him address that. But I just want to read one more criteria, and it has to do with this town commercial center plan that has to be approved by the governing body. And the question is, right from the website, what is a town commercial center plan? The town commercial center plan is a formal plan developed by the community to guide the growth of the town's commercial center. Examples of the town commercial center plan are downtown beautification plans or an enhancement plan, a facade improvement plan, building rehab plan, and improving pedestrian linkage plans. The plan shall include the following: a certified resolution by the municipality adopting the plan. I'm going to have to look for that. Mm-hmm. A concise narrative map presenting the municipality's vision for its commercial center. And it goes on, there's more detail. That's what they're looking for. That's what I was looking for when I wanted to see the file. I mean, we are, you know, up against in the 11th hour. I don't know. Craig, what are your thoughts? And on the merits of it and on the procedural parts of it?
On the merits of it and the procedural.
Should we
I think
should
we've
we go
addressed the
forward?
procedural part.
Yeah.
You know, I think ultimately, because I know you want to deal with other stuff here today, I would like to see some skin in the game.
Actually, take your time, because we're not going to have the time to talk about anything else but this. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, don't feel constrained on this point. So,
I mean, procedurally, I think we're walking in quicksand. There is no direction. I don't know where we are procedurally, which I think I addressed earlier. The merits of the plan, I don't disagree that the grant application should perhaps be submitted. I disagree with where the money is being spent. You know, we're bonding out millions of dollars to do school roofs. We could certainly use this money towards those kinds of things.
I need to interrupt you because the grant is project-specific. You don't file...
That's true.
Yeah, you don't file for, let me have 500,000, you file for a Simpson Court project. So if you don't like developing Simpson Court, you can't apply for the grant as, you can apply for a grant, but not as the mayor perceives it.
You're absolutely correct. And the examples that I brought up last night were things in our downtown area that could be improved. I brought people's attention to the benches. The bench in front of Town Hall, which is actually the boards are rotting in, and it hasn't been painted, and it looks like years. We've got benches all over the downtown area that are supposed to invite people into the downtown area. I would like to see some skin in the game, and I'd like to see it from all parties concerned.
Define skin in the game.
Well, a financial contribution that really makes sense. What I think would be appropriate to myself would be that Holy Trinity pays for their wall, approximately $100,000, that each of the property owners contributes $50,000 each, whether that be by a lien on their property that's paid over a certain period of time, or if they don't have the cash, and that the town puts in $200,000, whether from state grant or not. That way we have $200,000 from the property owners, we have $200,000 from the municipality or from governmental entity, and we have $100,000 from Holy Trinity. That's $500,000. That's everyone working together to get this done.
At the council meeting, you made reference to a conversation you had with one of the property owners, and I think what you were saying is you were exploring a compromise to the Simpson Court dilemma. What were you referring to in your comments?
Post-referendum, I met with one of the property owners in an attempt to bring everyone together. Instead of everybody, having a tantrum and going into their own corners, trying to get this done. And we worked on numbers. And the numbers that were bandied about, understanding that at the time the representation was $380,000 total expenditure. The offer was generally, I'll just say it was in excess of $100,000 on behalf of the 4 property owners. I did not find that to be sufficient, and those talks ended up not going forward from there. There were certain unilateral actions taken by certain property owners that I thought were not in good faith. But to get to that step and then to get this proposal, which basically on behalf of the property owners is $40,000.
Less.
Well,
$40,000.
$40,000.
Yeah, right.
From the property owners. When we were talking about in excess of $100,000 by whatever way, shape, or form previously, it doesn't really make sense.
Ralph?
Well, I just go back to this point of, I thought the voters spoke in a referendum a year ago. Why is this back in this form, which basically calls for public funds and a lease, which I thought were rejected by the voters? So why is it back, and who's bringing it back?
Well, let me turn that on you.
Right.
Because there hasn't been a concise answer to that by any public official. What do you think? Why do you think it's back?
Okay, good. All right.
Yeah.
I think that...
Folks, I really don't do this to him often.
Right.
I don't put him on the
said
spot.
good.
So this little speech I'm giving now is to give Ralph a chance to collect his thoughts. Ralph?
Yeah. I think that some people who weren't happy with the outcome of the referendum are looking for a way to essentially get the same project done. And I think that the mayor is behind it, but I was hoping that maybe Craig could shed some light on that. Is the mayor behind this?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay.
It was interesting that the agenda item for last night had no one's name on it.
Is that unusual?
Yeah.
It is extremely unusual.
Okay.
And the way it was worded was unusual. It was, discussion. The second item, I don't have it with me. It was exploration of possible options. That's, very, very general. And Wes Luby went to the microphone and asked, well, it says options. You know, you've given us one option.
Right.
Options is plural. You know, and the mayor finally said, well, it's do this or do nothing. And I'm sitting there saying, wait a second, it isn't do this or do nothing. It's perhaps put in the grant for something else that makes sense. You know, the argument that we're going to put in this grant because the engineering is done for this and it's the only program that we've done the engineering for, and therefore that makes it viable, is one of the reasons why these programs just are wrong.
You know, and I just want to sum it up for the viewers just this far. So far, we've gotten files that Mike can't see. Then Mike is told files don't exist. Then we have an agenda item that's unsigned. And then it sounds like we have the mayor saying, well, you have to do this right now. And it just doesn't sound like a recipe for good government.
There's a lot of reasons to be concerning. We really haven't talked that much, or you and I, Ralph, or Craig has, about the merits of whether the state should pay the lion's share of this. We haven't really talked about, and that'll be another show because we don't have time to do that. It is somewhat interesting that the Holy Trinity School solution to its problem of extensive cost to fix its wall, has been solved with the Simpson Court project.
I know, that's another
It's been solved. So if you know, from Holy Trinity Church's perspective, this is a home run, and that's fine. You know, that's fine. I'm just reporting that and raising the facts that these problems were melded together, and what gives you the parking lot, the same project that gives you the parking lot, the state funds, solves the problem of the wall. I think we need to wrap this up. We were going to talk to Craig about something else, and actually I have a present for Craig, and I have to reach.
One.
I have to reach down and get it.
Props.
And that's because he was a good sport for coming on the show. We thought we were going to be talking about Linda McMahon's campaign. We're going to have to defer that. We may invite him back, but in the meantime, what I have. Mike, have you got that? A Linda McMahon shirt for Craig.
Isn't that yours, though, Mike? Are you giving him your Linda McMahon?
Well, thank you, Mike.
Well, it's not. It's kind of mine, but I just delivered, and he just reached out and accepted it. So it's now his.
I've got a whole closet full, though.
Oh, dear. It's the wrong size for Craig. He's going to have to give it to his wife or something. I don't know. That's only a large, and he probably takes a bigger size. Thanks, folks, for thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. And remember, you know, if it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and if it's 9 at night, it's Citizen Mike, and Friday at 6:30. Thanks. See you soon.